Welcome to Adult Bible Class. I am glad that you are here this morning as we get going. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. First off, on the centers of your tables, you will see some sign-in sheets sometime over the course of the morning. Please take a moment to sign in. We want to make sure that we know that you were in Bible class this morning. And then also on the centers of your tables, you see a couple of different things. One is just a folder that says ABC Special on the front. If you want to take notes on this morning's presentation, that would be fantastic. But another is a pamphlet that is all about the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and that leads me to the special guest that I want to introduce to you this morning, Dr. Jeff Kloha. He is the Chief Curatorial Officer. He'll tell you all about exactly what that means, I'm sure, when he gets up here. He's the guy who works very hard to put together the best collection possible for the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. The Bible has shaped our history in just incredible ways, and he's going to talk about that. The Bible is an incredible book, as you know. He's going to talk about that and some of the work that he was doing. Before he was the Chief Curatorial Officer at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., he was a professor and also provost of Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, which is my alma mater. I actually had him for a couple of classes, and so he has been a personal blessing in my life. And I am really excited to hear what he has to say this morning. And I know that you're going to be blessed by it. I know that you're going to enjoy it too. And so let me say a quick word of prayer. Would you pray with me, please? Heavenly Father, thanks for today, and thanks for the chance to be together and not only to study your word, but to hear about your word and the effect that your word has had on culture, on the world, on history, and in life. Father, we pray that you would bless us today as we think about all of those things and so much more. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, can I ask you to give a warm Concordia welcome to Dr. Jeff Kloha.
I'll talk really loud. There we go. Very good. All right. Yeah, thanks for the invitation to be down here. I've been down here before. I know Pastor Bill quite a bit, and of course Zach and Ben, but great to be here. And especially because today in Washington, they're getting about 10 inches of snow. So the museum is actually closed today, so this is the only chance to hear about the museum today, as it happens. Not sure how I'm going to get back there tomorrow, necessarily, but we'll give it a shot. So again, thanks for the invitation. What I'll do today is just tell you a little bit about the museum, what we're doing, why we're doing it, some of the things that you might find there, and some of the things that we're finding as part of our work as a museum in teaching and research, and then we'll have some questions. We could talk a little bit about what the museum's all about. I think the basic reason, really, to have a museum of the Bible is, well, what's the most influential book ever written, right? The Bible. And does a book that's that influential deserve a museum that reflects how important it's been, right? So I'll rattle off a couple of museums. In California, there's the International Banana Museum. You guys been there? Okay, right. In St. Louis, where we used to teach, St. Louis has the Banjo Museum. You guys been there? I haven't. Okay, that's all right. In Oregon, St. James, Oregon, there's the National Vacuum Cleaner Museum. So I figure if there's going to be a vacuum cleaner museum, we should have a museum of the Bible, right? And so love to share with you about what that is and why we're doing it and what we hope it accomplishes. So if you were in the 8 o'clock service, I apologize, but I want to show you a little intro video to just give you a big overview of what the museum is, because when you think of museums, what's the first word you think of? Boring, right? And you think of Bible, and what's the first word you think of? No comment, it's okay, right? But so what we've tried to do with Museum of the Bible is to make it engaging for all people, right? Whether it's a 5-year-old, a 50-year-old, whatever background, wherever they're coming from, how do we make it engaging? So that's what this video is going to show you quick, and if you saw it before, I apologize, but just to give you a quick overview. So the purpose of the Museum of the Bible, our mission statement, to put it that way, is to invite all people to engage with the Bible. And literally, we mean every person. We've tried to create a museum that is accessible for people of deep faith who studied the Bible for years and years, for their entire lives, but also to make it accessible for people who have no idea what's in the Bible at all, have never looked at it, have no faith background whatsoever, but would feel comfortable and get a good experience and learn something about the history, narrative, and impact of the Bible when they come in. So all people has been a real key thing for us to think about as we put together the exhibits, the programs. In our world today, right, there's of course many people who live by the Bible, but many don't. And there's this, you might say, moment right now where a lot of people maybe learned about the Bible when they were kids, or they know references to the Bible, right? They hear things in the news or in movies or things like that, and they're not really sure where it comes from. So what we're really doing with the museum is reminding people of what impact it has had in history, in America, around the world, and that it's worth taking a look at. Maybe for the first time, maybe for the 4,000th time, but to invite all people to engage with the Bible. Just a few basic facts. If you've been to Washington, we're 2 short blocks, about a 5-minute walk from the Air and Space Museum. So just south of the mall in D.C. It's about 4 blocks to the Capitol. You saw it in the video there. The floor space is 430,000 square feet. It's gigantic. We have 6 floors of exhibits and a 7th floor with banquet space and a restaurant. It's out there. There's about 3,200 different artifacts on display, everything from very modern Bibles to 3,500-year-old tablets. We work with about 40 different lending institutions from around the world, the Israel Antiquities Authority, the Vatican, Jewish Historical Museum in Amsterdam, all kinds of partners. We opened in November of 2017, so just over a year ago, and we had our 1 millionth visitor on November 19th. So it took us 2 days over 1 year to get 1 million people through the door. So it's been really exciting to see the response. In fact, Annette, where's Annette? Told me, so she's been there 4 times, so we counted her 4 times. So I think that's okay. But 1 million people have been through the door. And that's really our goal, is to bring as many people into contact with the history, impact, and narratives of the Bible as possible. So a couple of stories. And the favorite part of my job is not the meetings and the emails, obviously, but it's when I get a chance to get out on the floor and to welcome people to the museum. So this was back last December. My niece goes to school in Pittsburgh. She's a junior in college. My sister was picking her up from school. They live in Chicago. And she said, "Oh, you're going to be in D.C., so I'll swing by with my niece and stop by the museum." I mean, Pittsburgh and D.C. to me are not on the way, but she did anyway. That's fine. And they showed up, first thing in the morning, and they brought my niece's roommate along. So junior in college, and I had never met her before, and come to find out she had no church background whatsoever. So I said, "Okay, you guys go see the museum. I got meetings. I'll meet you for lunch, and then we'll talk." So they go walking around for 5 hours. Come back, meet them for lunch, and this 20-year-old college girl who had no contact with the Bible at all was Snapchatting pictures of things to her father. "I never knew this. Look at this. Isn't it interesting?" Right? Now, I don't know what happened after that, but to have people who've never had any experience ever willing to Snapchat their father about the Bible, that's a win, right? Another example, and this is just last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. We work with a lot of different groups, but this is he's the U.S. Archbishop for the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Pretty daunting kind of guy. So we're showing them through the museum. We're working on an exhibit about Ethiopia and their long history with the Bible. That should open next year in 2020. And not your typical, people you think of as using the Bible, but in Ethiopia, it's actually the first Christian nation. They were a Christian nation before the Roman Empire. They've never not been a Christian nation. They have almost 2,000 years of Bible history. And in fact, they were telling me they actually believe that Moses first wrote the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy in Ge'ez, which is the Ethiopic language, and that he later then translated it into Hebrew. Now, I don't know about that. We can talk. But they have a long history of interaction with the Bible. And part of our job is to help the rest of us understand how the Bible has impacted their culture. And as we're walking around, we have all kinds of displays. And there's one video where we have early churches, like some of the oldest churches archaeologically, and another one with the oldest synagogues. But this one was with the churches. And honestly, I've never seen anybody stand and watch that, because it's like old rocks. Who's going to look at that? Well, we stood there and watched that video for like 20 minutes, over and over and over again, because it's their history. Some of their churches were in there from 1,800 years ago, and to be able to point that to them and say, here, this museum is for you. And of course, in Washington, there's a large Ethiopian population. So as the Archbishop is walking around, people are asking for his blessing. They recognize him. So again, our mission is to invite all people to engage with the Bible. Yeah, I'm the guy that doesn't really fit in the back there. I wasn't dressed appropriately for the occasion, apparently. So why the Bible? And just a few obvious stats. You guys know this stuff, but some part of the Bible, it is at least some part of the Bible, has been translated into over 1,500 languages around the world. Actually, it's probably closer to 1,700. And one of our displays has as many copies as we've been able to find, which is about 900 of those different translations from around the world. Did I do something? There we go. To get all those, actually, we put it out on Facebook and said, hey, here's the translations we're looking for. And we got about 300 of those translations just off of Facebook. People sent them in. It's kind of fun. You look at surveys, 75 million Americans read the Bible occasionally. 96 million Americans expressed an interest in knowing more about the Bible, right? Which is, I think, a pretty good number, right? It's worth knowing something about. 30 million have no interest in the Bible at all. So that's where we need to work, right? How do we create a space that those people are willing to come into to learn something about the Bible and its history and its impact? So one of the interesting things about the Bible in general, and we could talk about this if you like, but what do we mean by Bible, right? Because as you know, different faith traditions have different Bibles. One of our displays in the museum lays this out and shows the different traditions and their Bibles. For one faith tradition, the Samaritan Group, which is an offshoot of Judaism, still in existence in Israel, their Bible is 5 books, the Pentateuch. That's their entire Bible. And we have one of those. It's the red one, second to the left on the display there. In fact, I'll draw it a little closer. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church I mentioned earlier, they have 81 books in their Bible. 81 books in their Bible. And when we walked the Archbishop around, I made sure it was the right one. He said it was the right one, so I was happy about that. So just fascinating. So how did this happen? How did the Bible, by the way, do you know how many books are in the Protestant or the Lutheran Bible? 66, right? So we're kind of in the middle, right? More than 5, less than 81. So how did that happen is one of the most asked questions we get actually at the museum. And one of the projects we're working on is to talk a little bit more. We have some about that, why different traditions have different Bibles, but working on some new exhibits to help explain both how it happened and how different communities still use the Bible in these different forms today. The engagement part is a really big piece of what we're trying to do. It's a very immersive, experiential kind of place, especially when it comes to talking about the stories or the narratives of the Bible, right? So how do we help people experience in a short time what the basic contents of the Bible are? One of the things we did was to create an immersive experience around the village of Nazareth. So we went to, there's a second century village in Israel that we went to and did a laser scan of the buildings and reconstructed those buildings inside the museum. So I'm going to give you a little walkthrough, and it's kind of fun, so just bear with it. But so this is...
Hi, I'm Danielle with Museum of the Bible, and we're here on the narrative floor, specifically inside Nazareth Village. We're going to give you a little sneak peek so you can see what it looks like, but we're excited to have you here inside the building. Remember, you can reserve your tickets online at www.museumofthebible.org/tickets.
So rather than just do, here's a text panel that tells you about what life in the first century was like, we created a village so people could walk in and get a feel for it. We have living history interpreters who portray people in the village. There's a village elder who describes what worship life was like in the synagogue. There's a woman at the well who talks about, what the life of a woman was like in the first century in Galilee, explains the food. There's a carpenter who talks about what carpenters would do, builders, those kinds of things in the first century. So to create an immersive, easy way for people to learn experientially about what things are like in Bible times. Have you been to Israel? Anybody been to Israel? I mean, you're not going to beat that, right? But for those who can't go to Israel, at least there's a small taste of what some of that would look like, and you can experience some of that at the museum. We also recognize that the Bible is not without controversy, right? There's always controversy about the Bible and what people do with the Bible, and some people aren't always entirely thrilled with it. So we've tried to create, again, a place where all people can engage no matter where they are, and have some opportunities for responses. I mean, here's one. This is on the screen. This is actually off my camera. How does the Bible make you feel? And people can write things that go up on the display panel in the museum. And somebody wrote confused. Well, that's an honest answer. So how do we, as a museum, help people become less confused about the Bible? What is it? And what's in it? Why are things the way they are? One of my lines on this is, what are the two things you never talk about at a party? Right? You never talk about politics. You never talk about religion. So we put a Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Right? So we get a little pushback occasionally, right? But again, if you're going to open a museum, where are you going to open it? Either in New York or in Washington. And I guess in 2012, when the organization was looking for a building site, either in New York or Washington, this one opened up and became available, and that's why it ended up in Washington. But that creates space, right? There's a lot of international people that come through, and here's a chance to find out something that they didn't know before about the Bible. And again, one of our design philosophies is to be inviting. It's just a gorgeous space. You walk in, there's a 140-foot long digital screen that has kind of rotates about every 30 seconds. You see it up on the top there, and it's kind of just a beautiful space. If you look at the floor, you see it's dark tile, and you can't quite see it, but when you get to the far end and get to the stairway, the tiles become white. So it's this theme of darkness to light, and as you go from the first floor to the 6th floor, it gets brighter as you go up. So just to be an inviting, encouraging place for anyone to come in. So a little bit of what we have in the museum. So we focus on 3 areas. We take the word we use is a non-sectarian approach in teaching the Bible. So we don't take a Protestant perspective, we don't take a Lutheran perspective, we don't take a Jewish perspective. It's non-sectarian. So we try to present things in a way that will be accessible to everyone and that doesn't push a particular faith tradition. So by focusing on history and narrative impact, it creates that kind of safe place for people to learn and just kind of get a foot in the door, if you will, and hopefully leave asking questions, wanting to find out more. So on the history floor, it's really simply a history of the transmission and use of the Bible, beginning from the earliest times when there was no written Bible yet, when there were traditions and teachings until it began to be written down. I'll just kind of walk you through a few things here. Here's where we get to the earliest manuscripts, especially of the Greek and some Hebrew texts here. The earliest one is from about the year 200 in this section. Some early, like the earliest manuscript of John chapter 8 is in the museum, earliest text of Romans chapter 4. But I could talk about this all the time because that's what I used to teach, and now I get to have it. Well, it's not mine, but it's you know what I mean. You keep going about the year 200, 250, you start to see translations into Latin and Coptic and Syriac, so we show that unfolding of the Bible as it's translated throughout the world. You get to the medieval period, and it just explodes, especially in the Western Church with Latin, the Eastern Church with Greek and Armenian, some other languages, so all kinds of beautiful things here. Also show that the medieval Jewish tradition was a pretty strong tradition, especially in Spain and Central Europe and what's now Russia. This is a particularly unique item. This is a Hebrew Bible, obviously in Hebrew. I don't want to explain this. It was written in the 11th century in England, and it has a date and a location where it was copied, so it's kind of unique. It's the only known object that dates from the time before the Jewish population was kicked out of England in 1290 AD. So that the king just said all the Jews have to leave, and this is the only item anywhere that comes from that time period in England. So it's important not only kind of for the history of the Bible, but also for the history of interactions of faiths, and sometimes it wasn't very positive. We also have some of the earliest Torah Scrolls. The Jewish tradition uses Torahs for their readings in the synagogue, and we have 2 of the earliest on display, again from the Spanish tradition and from the Central European tradition. Pretty beautiful, beautiful objects. Get through the Middle Ages, and then of course you get on to Gutenberg, which I didn't have a picture here for some reason. You get into the Reformation period here, and just for you guys, you can't actually find Martin Luther in the museum. So the case on the left, you see 2 books on the bottom shelf. The one on the left is a Bible that was given as a gift by Martin Luther to another pastor, and he signed a little, wrote a Bible verse and autographed it. And the Bible on the right is the personal Bible of Johann Bugenhagen, who was the pastor, basically Luther's pastor in the church in Wittenberg. So it's all of Bugenhagen's notes on the Bible here in our museum. And then to the left of this, we have a lot of video displays of like a life-size person, obviously, a life-size video of a person portraying Luther and reading some of his materials about why he translated the Bible. We have one for Tyndale, for Erasmus, for different people from this time frame. So, and you could actually see Luther's picture there on the bottom right. So we got Luther in the museum. And then we end the history floor. Again, this is where we show how the Bible's been translated into multiple languages, and yet where it has not yet been translated. So the work's still to do. This is actually a joint project of a whole bunch of Bible societies that are trying to work on the translations, and Lutheran Bible translators helped out with this as well. So kind of a nice partnership there. The other thing we show on the history floor, and this is kind of interesting to me because I focused on New Testament, not so much history, but we have a section that shows that some traditions didn't translate the Bible because they didn't need to translate the Bible. So I mentioned before the Ethiopic tradition. They've been reading the Bible in the same language for at least 1,800 years, maybe more, and they've never had to translate it. They still read it in the same language. And the Jewish tradition, the Torah Scrolls, have been virtually identical for at least the last 400 years. There's a very consistent way of copying and a way of teaching the scribes how to copy that for roughly the last 400 years, they've continued to use exactly the same form of the Pentateuch for their worship. So while there's, again, this strong desire to translate and get the Bible out in every language, for some faith communities, they've never had to do that, and they continue to use what they've been using for hundreds and even thousands of years as part of their tradition. We have a scribe in the museum, actually. This is Rabbi Adam, and he's copying he's a sofer, trained professional scribe in the Jewish tradition, and he's copying a Torah scroll which will be donated to a synagogue when he's completed. Unfortunately, he's probably he's got about 1/3 of where he's supposed to be done. Problem is, if you've been in the museum, he's very engaging. He likes to talk. He prefers to talk than write. But if you go, he'll write your name in Hebrew for you, and you can take it home. So. And kind of fun stuff. So I can go on and on and on about the history floor. It's kind of my favorite section. I'll tell you a couple interesting artifacts. The King James Bible, of course, is the most influential English translation from 1611, and it was very well known. We all have verses of the King James in our heads, I'm sure. But there's also interesting histories even with the King James Bible. And my department handles all, someone wants a picture of an artifact, we have to approve it, copyright, all that kind of stuff. The most requested image we get is this one. It's a 1631 King James translation where the sixth commandment is missing a word. Yeah, can you pick it out? Yeah. Thou shalt commit adultery, right? Now, what it's called the Wicked Bible, for obvious reasons, yeah. There's only 11 of these in the world because when the king found out that this happened, he took the license away from the printers and threw them in jail. So they all got destroyed. What probably happened is, this is in movable type, early days of movable type, and somebody had to put all the words on the block so they could do the press, and who did they use to do this? Well, they had apprentices, which were like 7, 8-year-old kids who they just made work, 20 hours a day kind of thing. And occasionally, it seems, these kids would intentionally introduce changes to get back at their mean bosses, and that's probably what happened here. There's another King James Bible from 1711, where it's Psalm 100 and Psalm 100, I think it's 111, Psalm 111, and the verse should read, "Princes persecute me without cause." What this Bible instead says, "Printers persecute me without cause." Right? So some 8-year-old kid is like, "I'm going to get back at you," and printer. So there's these, it's just, and what strikes me about the history of the Bible in general is it's really just people, right? It's people who have for centuries and centuries passed on these writings so that they can be used again and again and again, and the formats and even these kind of funny little stories just reflect how it has been passed on to us, right? And part of our job is to pass it down to the next generation. And it's just amazing, my role now is to make sure that these things are like bulletproof and completely safe. Some of these things have been around for 3,500 years, right? Some of these tablets we have and things like that, how do we make sure that they're around for another 3,500 years so that they can continue to tell the story and so that people can continue to engage and learn more about the Bible? So the fourth floor, the history floor, that's my favorite. We could spend hours and hours there, but you got to come and see it. The narrative floor is a very different floor altogether. And as I said, it's an immersive kind of space. So we don't, just put words of the Bible up, but give people an experience of the Bible. And we have 3 sections. We have a Hebrew Bible walkthrough, we call it. So it walks through what we call the Old Testament, but we use Hebrew Bible to be kind of neutral. It's about a 35-minute walkthrough. Let me give you a little taste of it here. I don't know if there's sound on this. Oh, there is. So that was pretty cool, quick one. But it's a room by room. You walk, you hit the next section, and you get video, interactive kinds of things to get the overall sweep of what's going on in that part of the Bible. And it's actually, I have to say, this wasn't, I don't think, part of the intentional design process, but the theme that comes up again and again is one very consistent throughout the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and that is one of promise. Right? So God promises, people fail, God saves. People fail, God stays faithful to his promises, right? And so that whole, it's a 35-minute walkthrough, focuses on what's the overall theme of the Hebrew Bible, of the Old Testament. It's one of promise. And it's been fascinating to have, friends of mine who are pastors, Lutheran pastors, have walked through it, and they're like, this is phenomenal. Walk through it with rabbis, and they think it's phenomenal. It's to show that there's some themes here that are consistent, and that we can get the details worked out, as to the individual books. Again, we also have the Jesus of Nazareth, the Nazareth Village section there, to get a sense of New Testament life, and then there's about an 11-minute video on the New Testament. Basically from the perspective of John the Apostle, eyewitness of what he saw, kind of through the New Testament there. So, when we do visitor feedback, the number one attraction or number one thing people remember in the museum is the Hebrew Bible walkthrough. That's always number one. It's a pretty cool thing. The third thing we focus on in the museum is the impact of the Bible, and this is a very different kind of space. It's very kind of modular. You can kind of do a lot of different things here. And it focuses on, the impact of the Bible in America, kind of a chronological, historical thing, and then impact of the Bible in the world, which is more topical. And here we have, I'll show you a quick clip of one of the most impactful things is the Gutenberg Press. And we have a model of the Gutenberg Press that does live presentations. This is Norm, and he's got his Museum of the Bible badge on, which is not original to the 15th century, but anyway. But the revolution is caused. Keep in mind that to produce a page of text in the Middle Ages by hand would take about 2 days. And here's, a 12-year-old kid producing a page of text in about, 2 minutes. So and of course the first book printed was the Gutenberg Bible, and this caused simply a revolution in technology. And after the Gutenberg Bible, within a few decades, you have the Reformation and the translation of the Bible into everyone's own languages, and the Reformation took off, all because of this introduction of technology. So it had a huge impact, and because of that, the Bible has been a foundation for education, for culture, for teaching throughout the world for 500 years, and that's what we show on the floor. So a few things. We talk about the Bible in art of different types. There's icons, there's modern art, kind of all around. The Bible in literature. So if you want to see where the Harry Potter books quote Bible verses, you can look at it, right? All kinds of examples of where the Bible is foundational for literature. This is kind of a cool area where it talks about the Bible and work, or how different people in different types of work have appropriated the Bible into what they do day by day. For Lutherans, we call this vocation, right? But here they just call it the Bible and work. And here's a firefighter, and there's a video of a man talking about how the Bible has shaped the way he approaches his work as a firefighter. This is a cool spot. It's the Bible and music. So all kinds of pop culture where the Bible is referenced, or even a main part of the song. I think this is Leonard Cohen up here. But you got Coldplay, you got Kanye, you got everybody's in here, and does about 30-second clips and keeps going on. You got the Bible in movies, so you can sit and watch different biblical references in movies. This is a pretty cool exhibit. It's the Bible and Justice. And here we actually sponsored some research a few years back on what happens when prisons allow the teaching of the Bible in prisons. And it's a study done by a professor at Baylor University. And what they discovered was that for prisoners who are allowed to have the study of the Bible while they're in prison, the recidivism rate, that is the rate at which they return to prison afterward, is cut in half. I mean, it's statistically half of what people who don't study the Bible in prison. So there's some correlation, there's some impact. And so this exhibit talks about that and how the Bible has shaped, there's this debate about is justice, is it punishment, or is it to restore the person, right? And the biblical framework, of course, is to restore. So it talks about that framework. And I got to say, it's a little interesting to walk into that prison cage and see prisoners talking about their experience of prison and the Bible, and to kind of be immersed in that, to help understand that. We also have some kind of hot topics that we pick up. And this one we opened, probably doesn't show up very well. We just opened this one up in November, I think it was, maybe October. There's a Bible that was printed in 1808 for the use of missionaries to teach the Bible to slaves in the West Indies, which sounds all great until you open the Bible up and realize that they cut out 90% of the Old Testament and about half of the New Testament. And the passages they cut out were not random. So the entire account of the Israelites being freed from slavery in Egypt is missing, right? And of course that narrative was hugely significant for the civil rights movement, but completely omitted from this Bible. It omitted passages about, Galatians 3, there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. You're all one in Christ. They cut that verse out, right? But they left in verses that are, kind of problematic. So they included verses like, servants, be obedient to your own masters, please them in all things. They left in verses like, servants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh with fear and trembling, right? So it's kind of it raised a lot of questions. We posted a little Facebook thing on this back in March, and we got all kinds of social media reaction to it. So that's why we decided to do this little exhibit. And we put this together with Fisk University, which is a historic black college in Tennessee, and with the African American History Museum there in DC. And there's a video of Fisk University students talking about, because now they use this in their class. People we give a response area for people to kind of react to this. And what's your perspective on what's happening with this book? Is it a good thing? So it's really been an interesting conversation piece, and really caused people to reflect on what do we do with the Bible, right? Are we using it appropriately? Are we using it for its purposes? So you can see on the cards here, right, the middle one there, would you call the slave Bible the good book? And the person wrote no, because they used it to justify keeping slaves enslaved. Right? So just a chance to think about these things. Some of these cards, as you can see, people write treatises, very long things. So we've gotten huge response, and Fisk University is collecting all these, and they're going to have their students work through these, and they'll probably publish the responses, kind of do a bit of a book or maybe a website on how people have reacted to this. So again, what we're trying to do is just get people to think about it, right? Here's what's happened in history with the Bible. Is this something we want to continue to do, or is it not helpful? A couple other things we have in the museum, just briefly, and then we could do some questions. We have a long-term exhibit, a 10-year relationship with the Israel Antiquities Authority. So they have about 700 artifacts from Israel that we have on display, and it's just amazing stuff. I mean, you heard about the Philistines, right? You can go see their stuff. It's right there. The Amorites, you can go see their stuff. So it's just a great exhibit from materials from about 1500 BC down to about the end of the 1st century AD. Egyptian material. They even brought over, it's hard to get scale, that's a stone from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They actually shipped over, it's about that big, I forget the weight, but it cost us a lot to ship it over. And they actually let you touch it. So you can touch a rock that was on the Temple Mount when Jesus was walking around. And it was one of the rocks that the Romans pushed over when they destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. So it's living history right there. You can go up and touch it. As I said, we also have a long-term agreement with the Vatican. So they have an exhibit on the first floor, and they kind of rotate things back and forth. And we're working on a long-term exhibit with the Eastern Orthodox Church, with the Ecumenical Patriarch and related churches there to show the kind of art and history, especially in the eastern part of the Europe and Asia and North Africa. We also do a lot of research projects, both on our artifacts and on some other artifacts. We sponsor some grants. This is kind of a cool manuscript. It's originally written in the 5th century, and with a Greek text of the Gospels. And because parchment, the material it was written on, is very expensive, they would often decide they wanted to put a different book on it and wash the text off and then write something on top of it. It's called a palimpsest. And for this particular manuscript, they did that 9 times over a period of about 400 years. So it's like an etch-a-sketch. You kind of write on it, clean it up. But you can see underneath, you can see some of the layers. So we've sent this out for multispectral imaging, and now they're able to see all 9 layers. And we've got project teams in Cambridge, in Texas, Abilene Christian here in Texas, There's a group in Germany working on one layer of it, and we'll be able to produce all 9 layers here in the next probably year that will come out. So we're trying to also sponsor, really solid research to help increase biblical knowledge and academic knowledge about the Bible. It's kind of a cool type. That's Syriac on top, for what it's worth. What's the reaction been, real quick? We've been pretty happy. We had an intensive evaluation in October. 69.5% of the people that did the survey at the museum gave a 10 out of 10 for their experience. So we're happy with that. 2% gave it a 5 out of 10 or less. So we got to work on 2% of our visitors. 76% said that they would recommend the museum to a friend on a scale of 10, 10 out of 10. 76% said 10. 1.6% said they would not recommend the museum, so a 5 or less. So again, we got a little work to do. And these are the words. When we ask them what's the top 5 words that are in your mind when you leave the museum, these are the words that we got. In order, actually. I was happy to see educational at the top. It's a lot of fun stuff, but we want people to learn something too. So we've been open for a year, a year in I guess 2 months now, and still in the organization, still figuring a few things out, but a lot of exciting things happening. We haven't done a whole lot yet in connecting with congregations, so that's partly why I'm down here, is to start to help you guys see how this might fit into what you guys do here. We're setting up some new programs for study groups to provide some resources before they come to the museum. They could come as a group and then do some sessions afterward on specific topics. So we're putting some of that stuff together. Of course, there's groups that come through all the time. But we hope to be a resource to all of you, whether it's as a church or as individuals, to learn more about the Bible and the impact that it's had, and just invite you to come on out. So there's our website. You could look us up, and there's my email. If you get to Washington, let me know. So any questions or comments about what we're doing? Yeah. We have a small coin collection, kind of the highlights that show certain things, but we don't have any research projects on specific, names or dates or things like that. We don't have a huge coin collection, so the short answer is no. Yeah, but it's a great topic. Yeah, it's a great question. So the organization started really through the Green family and their interests, and they started acquiring objects from a number of sources and then donated to the museum. But in the museum on display, I said we have about 3,200 artifacts on display. I think it's only about 600 of those are actually owned by the museum. So we work with a variety of lenders to bring other objects in to help, fill in the story. But they were acquired from a variety of sources, some from collectors, some from museums that were, they had multiple items of something. And you've probably heard in the news, there's been some challenges with things that were done, 8-10 years ago that we're continuing to work through. But everything on display is authentic and legitimate, and we're continuing to acquire more.
Let's use a mic here. Hear the question.
First of all, I want to say I really enjoyed your presentation, and I know Randy and I will be going there very soon. But I'm really amazed you said that piece of papyrus had 9 levels, different levels.
Wait, can you get a little louder, please? You
mentioned the papyrus that you have the students evaluating 9 different levels of writing on it.
Yes, right.
I'm
palimpsest, yeah.
amazed that it could differentiate each of the 9 levels and it didn't just all run together.
Yeah, so the way they do that is called multispectral imaging, and it shoots lasers at the surface, and it picks up different chemical compounds because each ink will have a different chemical signature, and then spits it into a computer that figures out, okay, this chemical signature is that layer, and this chemical signature is that layer, so it kind of splits it apart, and then digitally they can read each layer and piece it back together. So it's pretty time-consuming.
Do you think it'll be able to tell how many hundreds of years over the 9 different layers? You know, like the top layer was written 400 years ago and the bottom layer was written...
Yeah, they're pretty good handle on the dates. They said the Greek was originally produced in the 5th century, and the top layer, the Syriac, was produced in the 9th century. So it's sometimes hard to get too detailed, within 100 years, but and it's a variety of texts. Some are biblical texts, some are theological texts. There's some theological poetry, one of the layers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's an interesting. It's kind of unique. There are a number of, say, 2 or 3 layer palimpsests, but to have 9 is pretty unusual.
That's great.
It's a pretty
Very
unique manuscript.
interesting.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Do you have a recommended minimum amount of time to spend at the library if you're there for just,
Yeah.
let's
So
say,
here's the problem. If
and then
you did.
Excuse me, the next question would be, when visitors come in, do you give them any kind of a guide as if you've got 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours?
Yeah,
Okay,
there's a
thank you.
few ways we can do it. So you can sign up for a tour and get the 60 or 55-minute overview and then kind of figure out what you like from there. We also have a digital guide. It's basically like a big iPhone thing that you can put it on the table, punch in how long you have, what you're interested in, and it will program a trip through the museum for you. But realistically, the problem is if you did if you read every label, if you did every walkthrough, if you watched every video, every interactive table, it would take about 8 days to do everything in the museum. So, and this is universal experience. Like when somebody comes to visit, except Pastor Bill. Pastor Bill gets special treatment, but. When somebody comes to visit, I'll give them, okay, here's what's on 5th floor, 4th floor, here's kind of a way to do it, 30-minute overview, and I'll say, okay, just text me when you're done, and we can talk about it, kind of a thing, and usually they'll say, oh yeah, hour and a half, 2 hours will be fine. Well, almost every time it's 5.5, 6 hours later, and they're like, well, we can't talk because I'm late for my plane, kind of a thing. That it's so immersive that people sort of get lost in a good way. So what I like to do is start with the archaeology stuff on the 5th floor and then the artifacts on the 4th floor, the history, because that's the more kind of foundational and requires a little more thought. When you get down to the 3rd and 2nd floor, it's more, lights, camera kind of stuff and more fun. So, because what we found is people get to the 2nd floor and they spend 3 hours there, and then you get to the 3rd floor and spend 2 hours there, and then they don't get to the 4th floor, let alone the 5th floor. So yeah, if you come, there's a lot to see, and if you want some help in figuring out what you're most interested in, just let me know.
Hi, I have. Wow, I hate to hear myself on this mic. I have a question in regard to this. Are you trying to set up tours through churches so that we could have a 3-day tour and all go as a group?
Yeah, so you can go on our website and sign up for a group tour, and obviously there's discounts for tours, and just kind of do that on your own. What we're also working on is sort of more educational resources for groups to come in and do a more educational rather than just kind of a typical museum visit.
Okay, my second question is, I have made a contribution to the museum. How are you financed?
Well, we have a lot of support from the Green family initially. But now we are operating on our own. So it's a private organization. We have a separate board, and we're funded by donations and revenue from museum operations.
Okay, and the third question, would Israel ever loan you any of the Dead Sea Scrolls to be exhibited?
Yeah, we've been talking about it. They had a exhibit in Denver last summer, which they claimed was the last time they're going to exhibit the Dead Sea Scrolls in the U.S. We've continued to talk, though, so I can't say more than that, but we'll see. Yeah, it'd be pretty cool. I mean, the problem is these are 70 years old, 80 years old, and they've been displayed a lot. And early on, especially, they didn't know a lot about how light would affect things and what that would do to the material. So they're becoming more and more fragile. So they're very careful about what they put on display. Yeah.
Is there any authentic statue of Jesus?
Authentic statue of Jesus, like a depiction of Jesus? Yeah. Either. Well, not in the museum, and I'm trying to think that the earliest depiction of Jesus, I should know this off the top of my head, I believe it's not until the 4th century that we start to see Jesus portrayed in artistic form in any way. So yeah, there really isn't any, within the first 300 years, any depictions of Jesus that we know of. Yeah.
Hello, I got 2 questions.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Do you guys have access to the Shroud of Turin and the Spear of Destiny?
The Shroud of Turin, do we have access?
Yes.
I'll answer that no. Yeah. So the Shroud of Turin is, it's in Turin, Italy, in a cathedral. It's never left that cathedral, by the way. Now we are looking at doing an exhibit on the history of that and the study of it, but bringing the shroud somewhere would be virtually impossible.
And what about the Spear of Destiny from Vienna?
I'm sorry, the what?
The Spear of Destiny?
Spear of Destiny? Yeah, I've heard of that, but I honestly couldn't tell you much more than the fact that I've heard about it. So maybe we should talk.
And my second question is about the food. Is the food cooked with historical accuracy in regards to those days?
Yeah. Well, if we cooked authentic first century food, I don't think anybody would eat it. But the restaurant on the 6th floor, it's a nice restaurant. It's sort of Middle Eastern, food, so lamb and hummus and tzatziki and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of themed, but they wanted to make money, so they serve real food. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Again, thanks for those of you who visited, and I'd love to have you guys out. And if we can help in any way, just let me know. Thanks.
Hey, can we give him a hand? Just so you know, he knows a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. There is great wisdom, great insight, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come out and join us today. So thank you, and God bless your work. Thank you. Have a good week. Thanks for coming out. Next week for ABC, come on back. Walk with light.